Hello, this is the blueprint showcase for the game modes Deathmatch and Team Deathmatch for Helix. So now we're in the lobby and we can choose our team. So we chose Team 1. I selected this game to be a 2-player so that only one bot will spawn. So as you can see, as soon as you get into the game, it will start the loading screen with a correct art for the level.
5,
Then
4,
a countdown will start.
3,
I'm not able to move
2,
currently.
1.
And as
Do
soon
me
as I
proud,
start,
boys and
if I
girls.
had any allies, I would be able to
You
see their
know
outline
better.
through the walls. And this is... I died, but that is an enemy. As you can see, all enemies have an outline around them, a red outline. And the objective of the game currently is to collect as many DNA points as possible as to reach your final form. Scattered around the maps, there are DNA points that you can grab, and these ones give you 2 DNA points, which give you abilities, which I'll explain in a different video. But as soon as you manage to reach your ultimate form by grabbing DNA or killing enemies, there you go, you can then unlock the new mode. So it starts off as a deathmatch, so if I can collect DNA from an enemy. Bots are very good in this game, and obviously the collection will still remain even if you die because you haven't selected anything. So I select number 5, and if I were to go and try and collect more points off the map, I would get upgrade abilities. And finally, after the upgrades, I will get my ultimate form. Once this has happened, the game will shift from a simple deathmatch to a King of the Hill, where the players will have to contend.
Capture point is spawned.
As you can see,
these are worth a lot of money. Make sure they're secured.
So your assigned narrator will obviously tell you that a zone has spawned, marked by this smoke, and you'll have to come here and try and capture it. As you can see, the zone also moves every 2 minutes, as to avoid sort of zone sort of like bunkering down, and to avoid that. But yeah. Once that timer has, once that point counter has reached 100, then your team will have won, and that will be game over. So this is all the mechanics of the team deathmatch, and now I'll showcase the blueprints. So this is the gameplay game mode blueprint, which is the parent of the deathmatch and the team deathmatch game mode. What it does is it starts setting up the gameplay game state and the game info instance variable, as well as the tutorial variable, to check if it is in fact a tutorial mode. Then it will grab the session settings and grab the game info instance game mode variable, and this will actually tell the game mode which mode it should run, either deathmatch or team deathmatch. Then here we have the unpost login, which is when a player joins. It will then tell the player's gameplay controller to run the loading screen, which is simply a widget present in the gameplay controller blueprint. It will then grab the session settings, check if a session has actually been created, or create a session, and then if it succeeds, it will then ask the game info instance to produce the player teams, which we've explained in the previous video regarding the lobby. The player teams all contains the names and team numbers of each team, and will then set the team number. Now this function, set team number, actually runs to an empty one. The reason for this is because I actually use and overwrite this set team number function right here in the team match game mode. So in reality, this this doesn't call this custom function, but it calls this one, which has been rewritten. What this does is grabs the player teams, and then through the properties of each player team, grabs the name, grabs their team number, and then sets their the correct team for each player once they log in, because as we remember, this is on post login, so it's for each player. After that, it grabs the controller of the player that just came into the match and stores it into the all players array for ease of use, as well as it checks if the length of the all players is equal to the player teams. This is a secure check to see if all players have actually spawned. If it hasn't, it will just do nothing really. It will skip this check if we are in editor and testing it through the developer variable. But if it not, it will just skip, and then we'll wait for another on post login. If the players match the player teams, then it will say, okay, all the clients have loaded. It will then set the narrator team A and narrator team B through a random choice of the 4 narrators present in the team. This is a check as well to check that the narrators aren't the same. And once that is done, grabs the team number from the state from each player, and then sets the the narrators to the specific variable, which is stored in the gameplay controller, and so that the gameplay controller knows which narrator to play once an event has been triggered. Then now we are here in the event tick. So it does various checks, and I'll explain them one by one in a second. But before that, it will actually check if everyone has spawned. This variable starts as false, so it will automatically go into here, and then it will do a check for each player. Each player has inside their game, their controller, a check if they do have actually spawned, which will make this variable true. And if it's true, it will increase the temp spawned. If then the temp spawn is equal to the players, meaning that all players have actually loaded, then it will show a countdown. If not, it will then reset the temp spawned, or if the player teams equals to 0, which usually means that it's in editor, it will just skip this check and go into show countdown, and we'll set everybody's spawn to true, making this check not run anymore. So the show countdown here, what it does is it will grab the King of the Hill actors. It will do another check just to make sure that in fact all of the players have spawned, as to avoid any issues. So if that's if then that's being checked, right now we are 110% that every single player has spawned, and then we loop through the players, grab their controllers, and actually run the show countdown, which is stored in the gameplay controller. Show countdown is just a widget that will show a countdown of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 that we've seen in the showcase of the gameplay. It will add that player to the game info instance for storage and later use, and we'll also add it to the gameplay game state. Once that is done, once completed, it will skip the check. It will skip the delay, which is the a 7-second delay, which matches the countdown. We want to skip this in the tutorial because that's just useless. And then it will actually start the game, and 6 seconds later, boss will spawn. So the start game, what it does is it checks for the game mode. And if it is a deathmatch, it will start a countdown. Now, a countdown is not necessary in the team deathmatch because the game ends when all players have captured 100% of their of the zone. So it will just skip this part. Oh, it will just skip this this timer. It will instead just show HUD to all, which will after you'll be able to move and will be able to shoot and see all of your abilities and everything. If not, here it was just a simple countdown, and once the countdown has concluded, it will check who is the winner of the deathmatch through the check of the score in the player state. It will check who has the highest one, and who has the highest one will have the end screen of victory, and who's lost has the defeat. And this is for the deathmatch, and as I've shown, this deathmatch blueprint is completely empty because it's already been done here in the game mode, because a deathmatch is a very basic type of game mode and doesn't require any additional checks, like in the team match game mode that I've showed here. In the team match game mode, this will also have the King of the Hill settings which will enable the King of the Hill. So this function is called here once the first player has reached final form, which is then called in the game mode in the event tick. It checks if it checks here if a player has actually reached their final mode, and it does sort of a check for every second. And then once this has been triggered, it will enable the King of the Hill, which will open up the, as I've shown in game, will show the King of the Hill zone. It will show the activated smoke here, and it will set it to uncontested, and the other one will set it to asleep, and this one will basically have a delay here, which is the delay, the usual delay here of the 120 seconds for the first King of the Hill to spawn, and the second one will be set active, and it will keep going like this until the game has finished. Coming back to the gameplay game mode, we have I will explain these checks here. Now here it will check for the winner, and this one is the winning condition for the team deathmatch. What it does here, it checks if whatever team has a score of bigger to or equal to than 100, and if it does, then that team has won. It will then check which player is on which team, and it will then add them to a win array, and this win array will then produce the end screen of victory or the end screen of failure if you didn't win. Then here we have the check if teams have been assigned. This is something that is usually done at the start before the game starts, and it will check if all loading clients have actually been loaded. Then we are sure that all the clients are in, and we can assign a team number to them, and this simply assigns their team number through the use of player teams to check which player should actually receive which team. And once that is done, once the various checks and the various teams and numbers have been assigned, it will for each player will spawn them in character, because obviously they have loaded the level but they haven't spawned, so the controller is there but the player isn't there, so they will actually spawn. And once that has been done, it will set the team. We'll give a second for the player state to load, and then we'll set the player state to depending on the team, to either 0 if it's a deathmatch, or 1 or 2 if it's team 1 or team 2. And this is used just in here in the game mode for utility, this number. Then after the checks, check if the doors need opening, and this is checks if obviously the game mode number isn't 0. So if it's game mode is 0, it's a deathmatch. So checks if any players has actually purchased the ultimate, and for the first player that actually has this, will basically add it to the final level players. This is just a utility array that was actually used before, because previously in game you couldn't access the King of the Hill without having bought your ultimate, but we decided to scrap that, and I kept this just in case we needed it for any future mechanics. It will then check that there are the first player with a final level, because other players may have already reached that final level. If he is, well, then it will actually say, well, the player has reached the final level. It will run for each player the audio, and will, as we've shown before, say call the first player has reached final form, which is this one, which will enable the King of the Hill, etc. That check is explained. So then we have the King of the Hill, and the final one, well, we have this one. We'll just explain this very quickly. It is just a call to see if which player has actually killed the first character, and it will either run a voice line that's good if it was in your team, or bad if it wasn't in your team. And finally, the last check that it does is the King of the Hill, which actually updates the King of the Hill status and points, and updates that to each player. So grabs all the King of the Hills, checks if it's not asleep, and then there's a switch on string here with uncontested team 1 or team 2. We had contested previously, but we decided to just have it either if whatever the majority of the players are within that King of the Hill, it will just trigger to team 1 or team 2. So obviously if it's uncontested, it's just gray, and this will basically check that if their percentage, both of their percentage is below 0, it will then run this function, which is used throughout the King of the Hill capturing, and this will simply depending on the score, it will update each player's controller to basically say if it's uncontested, or to add points to King of the Hill Team 1 or Team 2 with all the variables of the scores, the color. If it's Team 1 is red, if it's Team 2 is blue, etc, etc. And is basically the same throughout. The Team 1 and Team 2 is exactly the same, except obviously here it will tell them, hey, well, it's not actually uncontested. It's well, this is the function for the controller. If it's actually not uncontested, because obviously you've passed in the King of the Hill captured, and this is run throughout the King of the Hill capturing checks. And obviously it stores all the data if it's necessary throughout the game. And this has been the demonstration of the blueprint showcase of the game modes, both Deathmatch and Team Match.